Tonight, my future daughter-in-law pointed at me and laughed. "That's the cleaning lady I told you about, my fiancé's mother." The room went quiet the way a knife is quiet. 100 faces turned. I held a small gift bag, a first edition I'd saved for, 1/4 at a time. Navy cardigan, resoled shoes. Easy to overlook. That was the point. Then a billionaire froze. Marcus Hale, yes, that Marcus, lowered his phone and stared like he just watched the market do something impossible. He walked straight toward me, voice low enough to move the air. "Ms. Rowan?" The bartender stopped mid-pour. Savannah's smile got brighter. "She volunteers at a library in Ballard," she told the room, like a label on a jar. Marcus didn't smile. "You look," he whispered, "like someone who signs wires." I could end it here. Smile, vanish, take the bus home. Or I could stop pretending I was the harmless woman in the cardigan. Listen carefully. There are 2 kinds of invisibility: the blanket you choose and the tarp they throw over you. They laughed at a cleaning lady. They were about to meet the woman who writes the contracts that decide who keeps their job. Tonight, one sentence will turn humiliation into leverage, a giggle into a clause, and a party into a battlefield. Marcus leaned closer. "Do you want me to help them forget, or do you want to be remembered?" I looked at my son. I looked at the book. I chose, and I was. Standing near a slender cactus in a white pot, I watched the people who would be my family if geography and luck worked as designed. Savannah's father, Victor Carrington, shook hands with men who said their names with a half smile, the way men do when their names are meant to be known already. He was CFO at a data firm that provided tools to companies who bought other tools from larger companies. His job description could have been written as a whisper. He had the habit of someone who had learned early that money did not like to be looked at directly. He laughed when the men laughed. He nodded when they nodded. He did not look at me at all. A server floated by with tiny crab cakes, and I took one and did not taste it. The DJ changed tracks and the laughter changed key. Marcus took a call, then 2, pacing by the door. He didn't leave. A dozen people spoke to him. He spoke to none of them. He was waiting. There are 2 kinds of invisibility. The first is the kind you wear like a blanket, and the second is the kind other people drape over you like a tarp. Tonight, I wore both. When the formal toast started, the lights went a shade warmer. Savannah held Evan's hand in both of hers and kissed his knuckles as if she were promising something to the bones. She said, "We're so grateful to our families, to our friends, to the ride or die people who made this night possible." She began to name them, her father first, her mother who wore a dress that looked like the surface of a lake, her friends from Stanford whom she called her sisters, the caterer, the gallery owner, the florist, the DJ, the woman who did her hair, the dog walker for some reason. "And," she said, after a pause that seemed designed to be filled with something, "to Evan's mom who," she glanced at her friends and smiled, "keeps it simple." People laughed because people like directions. She looked to me and lifted her glass in a parody of a salute. I lifted mine back. The glass made a sound like a tiny bell when it touched my ring, the gold one I'd kept when I sold the others, because there are some symbols you do not exchange, even when you should. I don't know what I would have done if Marcus hadn't interrupted then, as if he were the answer the room had requested and could not name. "Forgive me," he said into the mic. A rich man's apology that meant, watch me. I need to borrow your future mother-in-law for a moment. There was a ripple of laughter, the laughter you use when you don't know what else to do. He set the mic down on the nearest table, took my elbow with the same care he would have taken if it had been the elbow of a senator, and guided me into the side hallway where the bathrooms lived as if they were secrets. Sloan. E.J. Sloan. No, I said, and allowed myself a small smile. But I like her work. He laughed once, abruptly, like a man whose too tight a tie had been suddenly loosened. Then his voice dropped. Don't make me list the hats, the shell companies, the trusts, the Wyoming LLCs with pine trees for names, the signatures you haven't used since before the pandemic. You think I don't know the woman who threatened to take her entire business to Europe if my fund tried to insert one more golden share? He shook his head, some feeling moving across his face that looked uncomfortably like respect. You were a rumor in my world long before you were a face on my screen. I didn't think you were real. Then you were, once, in a 14-minute call. I never forgot. Then you know I value my privacy, I said. I do, he said, which is why I'm asking you if you need anything. People make mistakes at parties. They say the wrong names. If you want to be no one tonight, I will help this room forget you tomorrow. You think I'm ashamed? I think you're a strategist, he said. And I think a strategist chooses where the game is played. I considered him. He was giving me something, though I could not tell whether it was out of chivalry or calculation. Maybe both. Men like Marcus like to imagine themselves as knights, but their armor is usually reinforced with billable hours. I came to bring my son a book, I said. I would like to do that without a press release. Then that is what you will do, he said, and inclined his head, a courtly little movement from a century that believed in curtsies. If you need me, I'll be near the door, looking like a plant. He left me in the hallway with my breath, which I let out carefully. In front of the mirror, I fixed the cardigan at my shoulder, as if it were a cape. When I came out, I walked over to Evan, who met me halfway. He was pale. Mom, he said, I'm sorry. She didn't mean it like that. She meant it, I said. She's allowed to mean things. So are you. Can I, he swallowed, can I see the book? I handed it to him. He opened the bag with a tenderness I had last seen when he'd been 9, unwrapping a Lego box as if any sharp move would make it vanish. When he saw the cover, he closed his eyes. Of Mice and Men, he read, thumb tracing the scuffed linen. The edition you wouldn't let me carry to school because I'd destroy it in a week. I loved you too much to let you love it to pieces, I said. Mom, he said, and folded me into his arms in the middle of the gallery. For a moment, the room narrowed to the space between his shoulder and my cheek. Thank you. Savannah joined us, smile bright enough to qualify as a second lighting scheme. What's that? She asked. Oh, a book. It's a first edition from 1937. Savannah's smile flickered as if the electricity had blipped. Wow, she said, drawing out the vowel. So sentimental. Marcus was as good as his word, For the rest of the evening, he stayed near the door, intercepting people and bending their will towards some song only he could hear. The laughter found other targets. The introductions flowed elsewhere. I was allowed to be my favorite thing, unremarked upon. At the end of the night, as the caterers began to clear and the DJ found something that sounded like a lullaby made by accountants, I made my way toward the coat rack. Marcus drifted over, hands in his pockets like a man doing nothing at all. I was kind. He replied, "Self-serving. I've seen what happens when a myth becomes a press release. It ruins the myth. We need our myths." "And what is mine?" I asked. He smiled. "The woman who built a fortress out of paper and dared the men with swords to find her. The one who writes checks from a shadow and calls them mercy." "I don't write many checks." "Not many," he agreed. "But when you do, people keep their jobs." He lifted his shoulder. "Besides, even if I'm wrong, I enjoy being in on something that isn't my own." He offered me his card. I didn't take it. He nodded as if I had, and moved away. Outside, the air had the cold clarity that means San Francisco is trying to be Seattle and not quite making it. I took the bus home, like a woman in a story who has not yet been kissed. On the seat beside me, a teenager watched a video of someone unboxing a sneaker as if it were a religious ritual. I wondered what we looked like. All of us traveling the city in our tiny capsules, carrying lives we never set down. The apartment smelled like lemon cleaner, because I liked lemon cleaner. I made tea and sat at the little table by the window and watched the dark do what darkness does. Keep secrets. You want to know how a woman becomes a myth. You want to know what I did when I wasn't polishing the reference desk at the public library and wearing a cardigan that made people think I didn't see them seeing me. You want me to tell you the pieces. I will, but know this first. Every fortress starts as a wound. I was 23 when I married a man who made promises sound like poetry. His name was Daniel, and he had hands that knew how to hold a coffee cup like it was a chalice. He was a coder before coding became a way to buy a house. At night, he would lie on the floor and talk about the internet as if it were a country we could both move to and never have to see anyone we didn't like again. I was a paralegal at a boutique firm that thought boutique made it sound charming to charge $400 an hour. I loved contracts because they were spells that worked. Speak this language, sign here, and a thing becomes true. When Evan was born, we lived in a one-bedroom in Ballard with windows that looked onto other windows. I used to stand with him at 3 a.m. and watch other people watch their televisions and think, we are all trying to be less alone. Daniel wrote code in the corner with headphones on. Sometimes I would look up and see him staring at nothing with the look of a man whose blood had been replaced with math. He came home one night when Evan was 3 with a grin and a partner. The partner's name was Caleb Stone, which was not, as far as I could tell, a joke. They had founded something, he announced, a revolutionary data security company that would change the way small businesses protected themselves. He said it as if we were on a game show and the prize was a house with new countertops. He wanted me to help them with the paperwork. You read contracts. You know what words do. He brought me a folder with papers clicked to papers and eyes scratched from looking at screens. The idea was simple, a lock that learned, a security system that noticed patterns and anticipated threats, then adjusted like a good parent. It made sense to me in a way so much code did not, because it was about listening to what had not yet happened. I wrote their operating agreement on the weekends while Evan napped, the letters marching across the page like soldiers going somewhere righteous. When they got their first angel check, we took a picture of the 3 of us holding it like the deed to an idea. I thought I was in a family. What I was in was a story. Those are different things. The first time I was invisible professionally wasn't at an engagement party. It was in our kitchen at 2 a.m. when Daniel and Caleb decided that the equity split that had been fair when the company was worth a promise was no longer fair now that it was worth a number. The version of the agreement that made it to signatures didn't have my name on it anywhere but the bottom, under the words, "prepared by." Caleb said it was cleaner. Daniel said we were married. What was his was mine. I know. You don't have to tell me. I have told myself. They called the company Harbor Lock. They raised money. They hired kids who wore hoodies to board meetings. They moved into a co-working space and called it an office because the coffee was free. When the first customers started sending actual money, the men got louder. When a bank wrote a letter of interest and then a term sheet, they became strangers. Success is a mirror that shows you who you already are. In the 3rd year, after a deal with a logistics company whose name I still cannot say without tasting copper, the men had a fight big enough to require lawyers. The lawyers were friends of friends. They called me honey. They told me not to worry. They told me I was safe. Then Daniel came home with a look that made me move the breakable things out of reach. "They're taking the tech," he said. "Caleb says it was never ours. The bank wants to bring in their guy." "The bank can't," I started, but the sentence died when Daniel threw the glass. He moved out that night. He did not take the coat because the coat was never a thing you could put in a bag. He took a sweater and a toothbrush and the picture of him holding Evan in the hospital. He left his wedding ring on the table like something he'd found in the street. I picked it up. When I held it, my hand shook as if I had touched a live wire. You are going to ask what I did next. I will tell you. I began to listen harder. I kept my job at the law firm, and I learned how to read between the lines the way a woman learns how to walk through a parking garage. I learned which partners were playing with numbers and which were playing with people. I learned which deals happened in rooms and which happened over oysters. I learned that if you are quiet long enough, people begin to narrate their own behavior for you, just to fill the silence. On Wednesdays, I volunteered to review contracts for the firm's pro bono clinic. That is where I met a woman named Elise June Sloan, who was not a woman at all. She was a trust. The Wyoming Secretary of State's website is not romantic, but if you know what you are looking for, it can make you weep. A trust needs a name. Sometimes that name is a joke between men. Sometimes it is a tree. Sometimes it is a woman who does not exist except on paper. I created E.J. Sloan because I needed a container powerful enough to hold everything I could not hold in my hands. E for Lila's middle name, J for June, Sloan because it sounded like somebody's grandmother and somebody's lawyer. Through E.J. Sloan, I began to buy things men didn't know they were selling. Patent portfolios mostly. IP left over from companies that had died ceremoniously, their graves marked by press releases. Rights to an algorithm that used to be worth millions, now worth pennies because the men who had written it had decided to move to Bali and teach yoga. A license to something someone's intern had mistakenly filed as an assignment. A stake in a company that tried to predict where trucks should park to avoid parking tickets. A database of threats. A database of something other than threats. I bought all of it the way a woman buys notebooks, believing that one day one of them will contain the sentence that changes everything. In year 10, when Evan was in college and never answered his phone on weekends, I found it. In a bankruptcy auction held by a court where no one had ironed their shirt, an asset was listed like a typo, Adaptive Perimeter Recognition, V2.19. There was, attached, a line in an email from a man to another man that read simply, "That old harbor code?" He had spelled harbor with a U, which meant he had not been in Seattle long. The number beside the asset would not have paid for a couch in Savannah's apartment. I bid. I won. Adaptive Perimeter became the bones of a company I called Rowan Systems. Rowan after the tree that protects against witchcraft. If that makes you smile, so be it. I have found that men stop laughing when you buy them. Rowan grew slow on purpose. I licensed the core tech to mid-tier firms who needed something between a guard dog and a map. I rewrote the hearts of the contracts myself that night. I made sure every agreement had a clause that meant if the other party ever tried to sell me, they would accidentally buy me instead. I put the company in a holding entity that lived inside a holding entity that lived inside a sister of E.J. Sloan that I called Heart and Tide. Nobody asked who Heart was. That is the mercy of having a name that sounds like a direction. If you are imagining me now in a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows, stop. I stayed in my apartment because I am a person who cannot sleep in rooms higher than a tree. I ate soup because soup warms you twice. I rode the bus because I like to overhear what people think they are not saying. I wore a cardigan because there is a kind of man who will tell a cardigan his plans without asking her any questions first. You think I was lonely. Maybe I was. But I was also free in a way people who sit at head tables never will be. I kept the library job after I retired from the firm because it let me hold 1,000 stories a day without owning a single one. When Marcus had called me on Zoom, the only time we had ever spoken, I had been in my kitchen with the teapot going like a small, furious animal. He had called me Ms. Sloan because that was the only name my lawyers would say out loud when we were dealing with people like him. He had asked whether Rowan would consider a partnership with his portfolio company, Northbridge. Northbridge needed our lock if they wanted to keep their biggest client, a chain of hospitals I cannot name. I had told him we would consider it. Then I had set terms that made Northbridge choose between being rich quickly and rich with dignity. I have learned that the second kind of rich lasts longer. They chose quickly. I didn't care. I don't sign away the spine of a thing. We remained independent. I slept well. Back to the party. I came home that night with the taste of lemon and the aftertaste of laughter. 5 text messages were waiting, then 9, then a number that made the screen ask me if I wanted to turn on Do Not Disturb. Savannah wrote, "You okay?" Then, "It got a little weird with that investor guy." Then, "Should we all do brunch tomorrow?" She added a champagne emoji to make the words sound cheerful. Marcus wrote, "I'm sorry." Then he wrote, "I love you." Then he wrote, "Are you safe?" Then, "I shouldn't have let them." The sentence ended there as if it had fallen off the edge of his courage. I typed back, "I am fine. I love you. We can talk tomorrow." He wrote, "Not brunch." I wrote, "Not brunch." I slept. In the morning, I awoke before dawn, as I always do, and listened to the hour when the city is a door slightly open. I thought about the kind of apology a girl makes when she has been cruel. There are apologies that are prayers, and apologies that are bids, and apologies that are simply the sound a person makes when the thing she took does not fill the thing in her that keeps needing. I decided which kind I would accept. At 10, someone knocked on my door. It was Evan. He held coffee and flowers, which are the 2 things a son brings when his girlfriend has taught him about women. "Can I come in?" he asked. He did not wait for the yes. He put the flowers in the sink and the coffee on the table and himself on the floor. He had always sat on the floor when he had something to say that would break his own heart. He rested his head on the seat of the chair in front of me and sighed. "She's stressed. It's the wedding. She's She doesn't know how to be funny without being expensive, I offered. He winced. She was nervous about my side of the family, he added, and then winced again, as if the sentence had hurt him as it passed his teeth. My side of the family is me, I said. I know, he said quickly. I didn't mean it like that. She doesn't want to be the only person in the room wearing a dress that cost more than your car. My car is a bus, I said. He smiled, despite himself. You know what I mean. I do. I put my hand on his hair and smoothed it the way I had when cowlicks were the biggest problem in his day. I am not asking you to make a choice between me and her. You're not? His eyes flicked up, hopeful and guilty at once. I'm asking you to make a choice between you and a version of you that cannot stand next to your mother in a room. He let out a sound that could have been a laugh and could have been a sob. That's not fair, he said. Correct, I said. It's family. Can she come by? She feels bad. She feels watched, which is not the same thing. He looked at the flowers. She bought those? I said, you did. He lowered his head again. She wants to talk to you anyway, he murmured. She says there's something she needs to ask. Yes, I said. I imagine there is. We made an appointment like lawyers. Savannah arrived that afternoon in a white coat that looked like a very polite cloud. She listened to the hallway while I opened the door and stepped in as if she were stepping onto a stage. Her perfume went ahead of her like a backup singer. Hi, she said, with a smile that had been practiced into believing itself. I love what you've done with the place. It's so cozy. Thank you, I said. Would you like tea? I don't drink tea, she said, then remembered to soften. But I could today. Green or black? What's the difference? She asked. Evan cleared his throat in the way of a man who has just realized he must learn to carry things without dropping them. Savannah, he said gently. That sounded... I'm tired, she announced. I'm not at my best. Then come back when you are, I suggested mildly. No, let's just... She took a breath, turned the switch that lived behind her eyes. I'm sorry for last night, she said, and focused on pronouncing each word as if they were part of a foreign language exam. I shouldn't have said what I said. It was insensitive. It was, I agreed. What would you like from me? A flicker, quick as a fish. She swallowed. Could we start over? It was not the worst apology I had ever received. It was also not the kind of apology a woman makes when she has spent time in the same room as regret. But I am older than I was, and I have learned that people need different amounts of time to find the door. We can, I said. Would you like to sit? She sat on the edge of the couch as if the couch might stain. So, she said brightly, there was that investor last night, Marcus something. He seemed to think you were someone else. I said, right, she said too quickly, and you weren't, obviously. She laughed, then remembered not to, then did anyway. I mean, that would be unexpected, I said. Right, she said, and the relief that moved across her face told me everything she thought a woman like me could not be. She began to ask me questions that were not questions. Where I worked, the library, whether I liked it, very much, whether I had any hobbies. I didn't answer that. She asked as if she were taking an inventory of a storage unit she might inherit. When she had finished satisfying herself that the unit contained only furniture she would not keep, she smiled. We're thinking of a Napa venue, she announced. Do you like Napa? Gorgeous in October, I said. And expensive, Evan added. We have a budget, Savannah lied. Of course, I said. She stood a few minutes later, tried to hug me, thought better of it, hugged me anyway. I let her. When the door closed behind her, the apartment felt larger, as if someone had moved a wall. Evan stayed. He looked at me and then at his hands. She is not a villain, he said, quietly, as if he needed me to agree in order to go on being her fiancé. Most people aren't, I said. It's why villains are more fun in stories. He smiled a small, reluctant smile that belonged to the boy who had believed wholeheartedly in heroes. She'll try, he said. She really will. I look forward to it, I said, because no one does. 2 nights later, at 10:45, the hallway camera pinged. Savannah's voice drifted through the door like perfume. "The lock is weird," she told someone on the phone. "I guess she's old school?" She came in without knocking because Evan had given her a key. She went straight to my desk and opened a drawer. I watched from the kitchen for a moment before making a sound to let her know I was there. "Hi," I said. "The lock works fine." She spun around, dropped her purse, smiled automatically. Evan asked me to see if you had a..." She glanced at the drawer. "A pen." "I have many. I use them to write words. Words like, 'Please knock.'" She laughed, then inhaled, then let it out. "Okay," she said. "Fine. I came for something else. I came because I don't like not knowing what's going on." She picked up her purse as if it were a shield. Marcus Hale recognized me. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. My father's COO called me this morning and asked why Marcus had called him at midnight. Why would Marcus call him? They barely know each other, and when they do talk, it's never in the middle of the night. Maybe he wanted to talk about pasta? She stared at me. "I hired a private investigator. He can't find anything on you except the library job and a lot of redacted documents from other states. Why would a librarian be in a Wyoming database? Why is there a trust named after a person who doesn't exist at your address? Why?" She broke off and looked down as if she had just hurt herself. "Why?" I repeated softly. "You can't be that person," she said almost to herself. "If you were, then everything I said last week makes me..." She stopped and a shadow crossed her face, as if the room had darkened. "Anyway," she said, brisk again, "I shouldn't have come. I just needed to know if I was going insane." "You're not insane," I said. "So?" she demanded, eyes bright with something that was not curiosity. "Are you?" Her. The person he said. "Let's say I was. What would that change?" Her lips parted as if she might say something like, "Everything." Then she closed them. "Nothing." She lied and left. "You want to know why I didn't tell my son then? Why I didn't put papers on the table and say, 'Here is my life'? Because life is not a courtroom and your child is not a judge. Because love is not a thing you win by evidence. Because I needed Savannah to be who she was going to be before I decided whether she could be someone else. Because I am a strategist, and the game had already begun." In the next week, the following things happened. Savannah began to stop by 5 minutes early to every family dinner. She always had a reason: traffic, scheduling, a call she had to take. And while she waited, she walked around the room with her eyes. She straightened a picture frame and skimmed the titles on my bookcase and peeked into the dish drainer as if my forks might confess. Victor, her father, called me. He didn't leave a message. His number sat on my phone like a small, indifferent bird. "Marcus sent me a poem by text. It was by a poet I like, about how the woods are lovely, dark, and deep, and how promises are the only things that keep us from lying down in them and sleeping." He added, "Don't sleep yet." Evan brought me groceries. He didn't ask. He didn't mention the engagement party. He told me stories about his job that were designed to make me think he was happy. He wasn't. A letter arrived from a law firm with a logo that was 3 letters in a wedge. They wanted to talk about mutual opportunities between Rowan Systems, if such a company were to exist, and Northbridge Data. The tone was the tone you use when you want someone to know you know, but you can't risk saying how you know because discovery is a thing. I called a number I had not dialed in a year. "It's me," I said. "Which me is this?" the voice asked, warm and amused. "The one you send flowers to on the day you fire someone," I said. "Ah," Marcus said. "Hello, Myth." "Stop with that," I said. "It's undignified." "Dignity is just theater for people who don't have time for comedy," he said. "How are you?" "Curious," I said. "Why did you call Victor Carrington?" "Because he called me," Marcus said, "at midnight. He wanted to know whether I had indeed greeted his future in-law at a party by calling her a name that wasn't hers. I told him I had called her the wrong name for the right reason. He asked me what the right reason was. I told him I preferred to ask questions when the answers were inevitable. Then he hung up. "Did you enjoy that?" "Immensely," he said. "Do you want me to do anything else?" "Yes," I said. "Nothing." "Refreshing," he said. "You know, you are the only person with money I've ever met who believes in the power of patience." "I have power. Money is just the shadow it casts on a wall." "That's the line when you give the TED Talk. I'd rather choke." He laughed. "Call me if you need an audience who already knows how the story ends." I hung up. I made soup. I waited. On a Tuesday at dusk, Savannah arrived in a coat the color of a bandage. "Can we talk?" she asked without stepping inside. "We are talking," I said. "Inside," she said, and looked up and down the hallway like a woman in a movie. I let her in. I closed the door. I stood with my back against it so she could not decide to leave before the leaving would mean anything. "We're embarrassingly in debt," she said, as if she had rehearsed it until it sounded normal. "Not we, my family. Dad's firm has had a series of bad quarters, and the loan we took on the house—" She shook her head as if numbers could be dismissed if you moved fast enough. If you have access to anything, I'm not asking for a gift, a loan, an arrangement. We can draw up terms. I know that sounds awful. I know it sounds like I'm using you. I am using you." She laughed without humor. "I'm telling you I'm using you so it sounds like a confession and not a strategy." "What would you do with the money?" I asked. "Pay off the worst of the debts," she said promptly. "Consolidate the rest. Buy some time. Dad needs time to find a new role. He's 61 and he didn't do anything wrong. He just didn't do enough right. And the wedding can be smaller," I said. Her face went hard. "There is no quicker way to turn a woman into a statue than to suggest the shape of her wedding is negotiable. We've already paid deposits," she said. "You can lose them," I said. She blinked as if I had said something obscene. "I thought you would understand," she whispered. "I do," I said. "I understand that you are telling me about the life you built because you wanted people to think you belong somewhere. I also understand that you are asking for a thing while standing on a floor you still believe I cannot afford. Both things are true. Do you want both things to stay true?" She stared at me. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, "are you asking me to make you comfortable in the life you have, or to change the life you have so you don't spend the next 15 years asking different people the same question?" She sat down suddenly, as if the sofa had reached up and tugged her knees. "What would that look like?" she asked, and the voice she used then was not the voice of the girl who laughed in galleries. It was the voice of a person who has discovered her legs are not where she thought they were. "I could tell you, or I could let you tell me who you are." "How?" she asked, and when she lifted her face, there was fear in it and something that might have been hope if you stood far enough away. "A contract," I said, "between us. Not money, not now. Terms, conditions, a test, if you like, of the life you say you want. You're going to test me? She demanded, the gallery girl returning so fast the air moved. I'm offering you a choice. In writing, if that makes it easier, I am a woman who loves writing. She stood, paced, sat again. Okay, she said finally, because okay is the word you say before you know if you mean it. What will it say? Come back Saturday. Bring Evan. Bring your father, if you want. Why my father? Because some people only tell the truth when someone else is in the room to hear it, I said. She left. I made tea. I pulled out a box from under my bed, the one with papers that could, if read correctly, make large men sit down. I took a new folder from the drawer and began to write. On Saturday, she showed up early, nervous, wearing no jewelry. Evan arrived on time, carrying his breath like a glass. Victor walked in 3 minutes late, as men do when they want you to know they have somewhere else to be at any moment. I had set the table with 3 plates and a folder in the center, like a pie. Thank you for coming, I said. Please sit. Victor did not. I'll stand, he announced, as if his legs were a moral position. As you like, I said. This won't take long, he said, as if he were warning a dog not to ask for scraps. It will take exactly as long as it should. Savannah put her hand on Evan's knee as if she could keep him still that way. He removed it gently, set it on the table like a fragile thing. This is a proposal, I said, and slid the folder toward Savannah, because if you give a paper to the one who wants it most, the others watch with better eyes. She opened it. Her eyes rushed, then slowed, then sharpened. She does not read quickly by habit. She reads quickly when afraid. Mutual covenant for future family harmony, it said. Below that, in numbered paragraphs, I had written the following. For 2 years, Savannah would work at the legal aid clinic in the city 15 hours per week, unpaid. She would keep a log and bring it to me once a month. She would not record the visits for social media. For 2 years, she and Evan would live within a budget that would look insulting on paper. $2,000 a month for housing, $1,000 for everything else. They could choose the neighborhood. I would not subsidize beyond an emergency fund to be drawn only if someone wept in a hospital. If they wanted more, they would earn it, and they would tell me how, in writing. During those 2 years, they would not accept gifts from either set of parents exceeding $100. They could receive advice, they could receive food, they could receive a ride to the airport. Savannah would meet with a financial counselor once a week for 6 months, and then once a month for 18 more. The counselor would send me a letter if she missed without notice. Evan would call me once a week and tell me one true thing that had nothing to do with money. Victor would not call me at all. I had written more, of course. The contract included a line about learning to cook 3 meals that did not require an app to order the ingredients, about volunteering somewhere that would make you understand the word line the way people without money understand it, about taking a cheap vacation once a year to anywhere a bus could go. There was nothing about a wedding. There was a great deal about Saturdays. If you meet these terms, I said, when she put the paper down, I will trust you with the part of my life that I do not talk about while wearing a cardigan. Silence. You could hear the hallway. You could hear thunder somewhere far away that was not thunder but a truck. Victor laughed. Is this a joke? He asked the room, not me. Men often ask the room when the only woman in it has made them feel small. Who do you think you are? My son's mother? For now. Savannah looked at me with an expression that had not yet decided whether to turn into a glare or a smile. She said, 2 years? We'd have to put everything on hold for 2 years just to make me believe you are the person you want me to think you are. I said, yes. Evan stared at the contract as if it were a map of a country he had been told did not exist. He said, I can do this. We can do this. Evan, Victor said, using the voice of a man in a club where rules are optional. You will not humiliate my daughter with this farce. She was not raised to answer to a librarian. She was raised to answer to herself. I am offering her practice. Savannah's hands shook so slightly that only a woman who has learned to read tremors would have seen it. She said, "And if we don't sign?" "Then nothing happens. No money, no stories. We go our ways." "This is insane," Victor said. "We came here to ask for a simple loan. We can pay it back at 8%, 10%. We can secure the loan with..." "With what?" I asked. "A future? A wedding? A promise?" I lifted a palm. "I know what promises cost. I am asking for payments in a currency you do not believe in because you have never needed to. If that offends you, consider how offensive it is to require a woman to be poor before you will believe she is good." "No one said," Victor began. "I laughed," I said. Savannah breathed in. She said, 2 years, she whispered, not to me, 15 hours a week. She looked at Evan. "Could we do that? Could you?" "Yes," he said. He sounded like he had answered a question he had not been asked. Victor slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses jump an inch. "Absolutely not," he said. And in that moment, I saw the boy he had been, and I understood something I had not wanted to. This girl had learned her laughter at a father's knee. "Okay," Savannah said softly. "Okay. Then we won't ask her for anything." She stood, took Evan's hand, pulled him up, looked at me as if she wanted to apologize and ask and accuse all at once. She settled on none of them. She said, "Thank you for your time," which is what you say when you were leaving a room that never wanted you in it. After the door closed, Victor lingered, as bullies do, because part of the thrill is leaving last. He asked, "Do you think you're better than us?" "No," I said. "I think I am older than you in a way you will never be." He sniffed. "I don't know who you are, but I know what you aren't. You aren't family." "Not yet," I said. He left. I sat down and put my face in my hands. I had not cried in 6 months. I cried. It wasn't for me. In the weeks that followed, rumors moved through the small world of men who thought they ran things. Rowan Systems was considering a sale. Rowan Systems had been bought, and the buyer was French and angry. Rowan Systems had been a shell company all along, a ghost story tucked into someone's offshore ledger. None of it was true. All of it did what rumors do. It fogged the window so you couldn't see who was in the house. Savannah did not call, which I respected. Evan came on Sundays and taught me how to use the new app for parking because my neighborhood had decided to go to war with cars. He told me things that were not about money. He told me about a homeless man who had asked him for a sandwich and how he had stood in front of the deli with $20 and felt like God. He told me about a podcast he wanted to start about ethical tech and how the phrase ethical tech felt like a joke until it wasn't. He told me he loved me. He told me he was trying. One morning in March, my phone rang at 7, which is either a hospital or a mistake. It was Marcus. "Today," he said without hello, "come to my office." I began. "Please," he said. And if you've never heard a rich man say please and mean it, I recommend it. I took the bus because there are some days when making a car fight with parking is a humiliation I cannot endure. His office was high enough to make me queasy, but the reception had plants large enough to be friends. He came out to get me himself, which meant he wanted me to know he was doing it. He led me into a conference room with a table that could have seated a small town. There were 3 people at one end of it, a woman with a legal pad, a man with a haircut, and a man who looked like he'd been awake since 1987, Victor. "Thank you for coming," Marcus said pleasantly. "We are conducting a little business etiquette seminar, and I thought you might enjoy being a case study." Victor rose halfway, as if he were a gentleman, then changed his mind. "What is this?" he demanded. This, Marcus said, is the future knocking. He looked at me. Miss Hartman, this is Northbridge's counsel and COO. They are here because they believe Rowan has leaked proprietary technology to a competitor. They would like to discuss their concerns about the licensing agreement. I took a breath. It tasted like new carpet. Rowan doesn't leak, I said. Victor smirked. We have documentation, he announced, and placed a printout in front of Marcus as if he had just produced a rabbit out of a hat. The email said in crisp font, per our conversation, Rowan Systems agrees to the following adjustments. The rest of the words were wrong. It was a draft. It was a draft I had written and watermarked, and nowhere on it was the word agrees. And the footer had a tiny symbol, a cormorant, the bird Rowan used in internal memos as a joke, and the date in the upper right corner was off by 8 minutes because I had written the draft at 1 a.m. and Rowan's system hadn't realized it was a new day. This is not an agreement, I said. It is a fiction. Victor's COO frowned. It came from your office. It came, I said, from my living room printer in a folder I showed someone because I wanted to know who she was. Victor went very still. Marcus smiled without showing his teeth. You mean, he said conversationally, someone in this room attempted to pass off a draft as a signed accord in order to gain leverage in a negotiation? She wouldn't, Victor began. She would, I said. The counsel cleared her throat. Who is she? I said, your daughter. There are men who can stand anything. There are men who cannot stand to be told the women they made are not theirs. Victor sat down heavily. I invited you here, Marcus said to him, because I thought you might appreciate the opportunity to understand the difference between a conversation and a contract. You have treated everyone around you like a conversation. You have not yet understood that there are people who write contracts. You will not like what they write when you require them to. Victor made a small noise that could have been a word and could have been a grunt. He stood and left. His counsel followed, apologizing to no one. The haircut lingered, then realized the room was not going to make him important, and left too. That was unkind, I said when the door closed. It was precise, also unkind. I have discovered the two are often related. I'm not interested in humiliating him, and heard my own voice and thought, maybe you finally are who you think you are. I am, Marcus replied cheerfully, but that was a bonus. The point was, I want to invest in Rowan. No, I said. Don't be boring, he said. I would be bored, I said. You invest in companies the way some men collect wives. I am not a second marriage. He laughed, delighted. God, I like you, he said. Fine, take my advice instead. I don't take advice, I said. You take wisdom, he said. This is that. When you decide to reveal yourself to your son, and you will, do it in a room where the only person who can save anyone is already awake. What does that mean? I asked. It means, he said, and tilted his head, somehow managing to look like a saint and a salesman at once. Do not invite his fiancée. I did not plan to reveal anything that month. Life did what it does when you have a plan. It sent a surprise. Evan called me on a Sunday and said, voice thin, "Can I come over? I'm alone." When he arrived, his face looked like paper you can see light through. "She's gone," he said, in the careful way of someone naming a thing that could return if you say it wrong. "Where?" I asked, an unkind question, because there are only two answers, to someone or to herself. He took her clothes, he said. He took the couch. He took the ring. He laughed then, once, and put his hand to his mouth like a boy trying not to be sick. She left a note. It said, "I can't be tested for 2 years like a foster dog. I can't be poor. I can't be someone who apologizes for existing." And then she said the worst part is, "I think I know why your mother asked." I made tea, because there is nothing else to do with your hands when your child's heart is making a sound worse than thunder. "I'm so embarrassed," he said, voice shaking. "I let her talk about you like—" He stopped, because the truth would make him bleed. "At that party," he continued, I laughed, a little, not because it was funny, because I wanted the room to think I knew what it was laughing at. I know, I said. I was there. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I accept, I said. He put his head down on the table and wept, the way men do when they are alone with someone who remembers the sound from when they were small. When he slept finally on my couch, I sat with the box on the table and watched the light move across the room. I waited until he woke. Then I opened it. This, I said quietly, is what I have been doing with the time you thought I spent rearranging the spice rack. The papers made a sound like something being folded and put away just right. He read the names, the trusts, the LOCs, the contracts, and I watched the thing that happens when a person realizes the story they told themselves about you must be unmade and remade. He is a gentle boy. It hurt him. Good. Pain teaches tenderness. He would need both. He stopped at a photograph. It was not a photograph of me. It was a photograph of a table like this table in a room like this room with a woman like me sitting at it. In front of her was a laptop with the Rowan logo and a coffee cup with a chip in the rim. The caption was a date and a time and a note from my lawyer. This is the only image you cannot deny. It had been taken by a security camera at a co-working space where I had met a client at midnight. Because there are people who are braver after dark. He owns a company, he said, reverent and bewildered. Mom, you own a company. He laughed, the good kind of laugh this time, the laugh that says, I have found a map and it leads to a room in my house I didn't know was there. A small one, I said. He flipped a page. This is not small, he said. This is, he looked up. Marcus knew. He guessed, I said. He stared again. Why didn't you tell me? He didn't ask in a voice that meant you betrayed me. He asked like a boy asking where I kept the good plates. Because money changes the way people talk. You asked me once when you were 11 why we had to buy your shoes at the cheap place instead of the cool place. I told you because we had to be smart. That was true. It was also true that I wanted to make sure you knew which things in the world were soft and which things were bones. You think I don't know the difference, he said, because he had to. I think, I said, you're about to. We spoke until the light moved to the other wall and the kettle boiled dry and the neighbor's radio started playing a baseball game. He was quiet and then he was loud and then he was quiet again. He went home at midnight with a folder and a promise to lock it in a place where no one else could find it. He thanked me. He kissed my cheek. He said, I love you. And for the first time in weeks, I believed him, the way I had when he was 5 and the words smelled like peanut butter. In the morning, a text came from Savannah. It said, simply, thank you for telling him. Then, after a pause, I wasn't brave enough. She sent one more. I'm sorry for how I was. That apology was the kind that meant something because it was given to the wrong person for the right reason. I typed back, thank you. I hope you make a life that fits you. She wrote, me too. You might think the story ends there, with a girl who leaves, a boy who learns, and a woman who puts away her folder and returns to the library. It could have ended there, but stories, like companies, have afterlives. Marcus invited me to a dinner I didn't want to attend. He said, it's not an event, just a few people who buy and sell things for a living. I'll seat you next to someone who thinks money is magic. You'll enjoy it. I won't, I said. You will, he said. Bring your son if you want. I brought Evan. He wore a suit he had bought at a thrift store and had tailored because he had learned that dignity is not about price tags. It is about the way fabric meets bone. At the dinner, between the salmon and a dessert that tried too hard, Marcus raised his glass to people who buy with minds and sell with hearts. That's not a thing, someone muttered. It is tonight, he said. After, he took me into a smaller room that had a wall of windows and a piano. He said, "I want to start a fund." I said, "You have funds." He said, "I want to start a different one. It won't return money. It will return something else. I want to put people like you in a room with founders who will lose their souls if someone doesn't tell them a story about a different kind of rich. I want you to write checks out of a trust that never sends your name to TechCrunch. I want to call it the Hartman Fellowship." "I don't get to name things," I said. "I do this time," he said. "It will be mine too." "I don't do philanthropy. I do mercy with contracts." "Then we'll write contracts," he said. Marcus watched us with the look of a man who has just discovered his mother has friends. He asked, "Could I work there?" Half joking, half something else. I said, "You can do anything. You can get someone to sign." 3 months later, he announced on a podcast with an audience of 700 people that he had almost married a person whose idea of family had been designed by a magazine. He said his mother had taught him that if you want to know who you are, ask yourself whether you can sit at a table with someone who loved you before you had teeth and tell them the worst thing you've done and watch their face and forgive it. Either way. He did not say my name. He did not have to. People know the shape of a mother even when she is wearing a cardigan in the back row. Savannah didn't come back. She married someone else a year later, a man with a soft forehead and a job in real estate. I saw the picture because the internet has a way of showing you the lives of people you once loved as if it were your business. She looked happy. I hope pieces of her apology worked their way into her bones. Victor retired suddenly and began to teach a class at a business school in a city without a football team. He sent me an email with 2 sentences. "You were right. I had not known what I did not know." I didn't reply. Some conversations are contracts you never sign. Let them stay that way. Evan and I worked at Marcus's program and then beside it, and then, with a kind of pride that made me feel like a fragile thing, the boy started his own. He taught young founders how to write shareholder agreements that did not turn them into liars. He told them to ask for counsel from people who spent their days reading, not tweeting. He brought them to my apartment and fed them soup and watched as the way they listened changed. Some men left before the soup cooled. Those men will always find money. The others stayed. Those men will find lives. The day I told the library I would not be coming in on Saturdays anymore, the head librarian cried and then laughed and made me promise to visit. I did. I do. I will always love the smell of paper that isn't asking you for anything. The Hartman Fellowship launched with 2 rules. We did not take money from men who spoke in slogans, and every investment had to include a clause that made room for a person to make a mistake and then make another that was better. We called it the second try clause. If you want to know how we wrote it, ask me. I will show you how to write one for your life. Start with this sentence: I am willing to decide again. When the first check went out, it went to a woman in Yakima who wanted to build an app that told farm workers when the air would be poisoned. She had no college degree and 3 kids. She had worked in the field since she was 12. She had quietly learned enough Python to make something that saved an old man's breathing machine from failure. She cried when the money arrived and wrote me a letter that said nothing about equity and everything about time. I cried when I read it. Then I stopped crying and got to work, because I have learned that tears are the interest we pay on memories. You should not pay more than you owe. You want an ending. It is not a wedding ending. It is not a courtroom ending. It is a table ending. On Thanksgiving, 2 years after the gallery, my apartment was too small for the people in it. Marcus brought wine and stories and left before the dishes were washed, like a man who knows his value and his limits. The woman from Yakima brought an apple pie that tasted like a hymn. 3 of the founders, who had learned to write contracts that didn't make them flinch, brought bread and gratitude. The head librarian brought a book no one had checked out in 20 years because she knew I would love it. Evan brought a girl with kind wrists and a laugh that sounded like wood settling. Her name was Alina. She hugged me twice for no reason. When I told her I didn't eat turkey, she made me a plate with everything else and sat with me while everyone else talked about football, as if it were a religion. At the end of the night, after the last glass had been dried and the last ridiculous story had been told twice, I stood at the window with a cup of tea and thought about the first time I had stood there and decided to write a life down because no one else would. Evan came and put his arm around me. "Do you ever wish I had married her?" he asked. "No," I said. "Even if we'd be rich?" he teased. "We are," I said. He laughed, then stopped when he realized I meant it. He looked at me with eyes that had learned how to see 2 things at once, what is and what could be. "I never asked," he said. "The foundation, the fellowship, the everything. What will you call it when it's all of ours?" "Why would I name it?" he asked. "Because names are contracts," he said. "Then call it this," I replied. "Call it after." He tilted his head. "After what?" "After the part of the story where someone is humiliated and thinks that is the end. After the part where a woman has to choose between being underestimated and being alone. After the part where money and love try to occupy the same room and one of them refuses to be quiet." I looked up at him. "After that, after everything we thought we were when we were afraid." He kissed my cheek. "Happy after," he said. "Happy after," I said back. And we both laughed at how silly and right it sounded. I am not a myth. I am a woman who learned how to sign her own name. I am a mother who asked the person my son loved to decide who she wanted to be in a room without flowers. I am a librarian who reads contracts for fun and cooks soup for people who might someday write a better version of the world. I am a person who took a laugh and turned it into a clause. If you are listening to me now, if you are the kind of person who sits in the back row because you think the stage is for the people who were born on it, hear me. You do not have to be loud to be heard. You have to be willing to say one thing long enough that the world begins to repeat it back. Here is mine. A promise is not a fairy tale. It is a sentence that becomes true because 2 people keep speaking it. Write yours. Sign it. Keep it. When someone laughs, don't argue. Bring them a book that is older than their certainty. Stand your ground. Invite them to a table. Lay out your terms. Ask them to be better. If they are, make soup. If they aren't, make soup anyway because someone else will be hungry before you think they will, and you will want to be ready. There is so much of life that is contract and so much that is covenant. Learn the difference, and when in doubt, choose the one that will allow you to forgive yourself later. That is wealth. Everything else is numbers. The last thing Savannah ever sent me was a photograph of a baby girl with hair like smoke. The message said, "Her name is Ada. She is the course correction. Thank you for trying to teach me that before I was ready." I wrote back, "It is never too late to be someone you respect." I meant it. Maybe she did too. Maybe one day she will tell that child the story of a woman who showed her a contract, and the girl will ask if the woman was mean or kind, and Savannah will say, "The only answer that makes a life." Both. Because kindness without edge is decoration, and edge without kindness is just a knife. I put the phone face down and picked up a pen. I had a promise to write. It began simply, "I, Lila June Hartman, promised to be visible in the ways that matter and invisible in the ways that don't. I promised to write contracts that do not require anyone to become small. I promised to give money in a way that makes room for mercy. I promised to teach my son how to be proud in rooms that demand something else. I promised to laugh only when the joke does not cost anyone their dignity. I promised to keep one sweater that makes me feel safe and to get rid of the other kinds of armor. I promised to sign this contract every day I wake up surprised that I've been given another one to write. Then I signed it. I put it in the folder without tabs, the one that holds the only papers that matter. I went to bed. I slept. In the morning, I woke up and made soup because it was going to rain and I wanted the house to smell like mercy.